Welcome to another episode of People a Pod. I want you to imagine something for me. Picture a World War I hero who endured just relentless enemy fire, took a bullet to the chest, lost a leg, and somehow still managed to save nearly 200 American soldiers from a horrific friendly fire incident.
Wow, yeah, that's the kind of story they make movies about.
Exactly. And this hero was so revered by the troops that General John J. Pershing, the commander of the American Expeditionary Forces himself, he actually personally saw them off at the docks when they returned home to the United States.
That's right, the ultimate honor.
But here is the twist. I want you to imagine that this highly decorated, battle-hardened war hero weighed about 1 pound and had feathers.
It's such an incredible image to start with, isn't it? I mean, we spend so much of our time picturing the gritty, strictly human element of trench warfare.
Yeah, the mud, the artillery.
Exactly, the mud. And we completely forget about the other species operating right alongside those soldiers.
Right, so today's deep dive is all about Cher Ami, which translates to dear friend in French. And this bird is easily the most famous homing pigeon in all of military history.
Without a doubt.
But, we aren't just telling a cute animal story today. We're exploring the absolute fog of war, the desperate measures human beings resort to when every single piece of modern technology completely fails them.
Yeah, and we're also looking at how the military-industrial complex goes about building its legends, right? Because the line between historical fact and perfect public relations can get very, very blurry.
Oh, absolutely. It's so blurry. So let's get into the context. If we want to understand why a tiny bird became the absolute last hope for hundreds of men, we kind of have to look at the catastrophic state of communication in 1918.
Yeah, because we tend to think of World War I as this grand dawn of mechanized warfare, right? You've got telegraphs, telephones, radios.
Tanks, all that stuff.
Exactly. But those communication systems were incredibly fragile under the realities of a modern artillery barrage.
So paint that picture for us. I mean, the U.S. Army had miles of wire and brand new radio technology. Why on earth were they relying on something as seemingly archaic as a bird?
Well, because the environment simply wouldn't allow the technology to function. Just imagine millions of artillery shells constantly churning up the earth.
Just nonstop explosions.
Right. They're obliterating telegraph wires much faster than combat engineers can even lay them down. Telephone lines are cut constantly.
What about radios, though?
Early radio technology wasn't something you just, carried in your pocket. It required heavy, clunky batteries that often needed to be hauled by mules, and the signal was incredibly unreliable in varied terrain.
So if the tech fails, that just leaves human runners, right?
Well,
and I imagine the casualty rates for soldiers literally sprinting across no man's land with a handwritten note were just unspeakably high.
Horrific. Just horrific. I mean, a runner stepping out of a trench was an immediate target for every sniper and machine gunner in the sector.
God, that's terrifying.
It really is. So when the U.S. Army arrived in France, General Pershing's chief signal officer, a guy named Colonel Edgar Russell, he was given a harsh reality check by the British and the French commands.
What'd they tell him?
They told him plainly, your wires will break, your radios will fail, your runners will die, you need pigeons.
Wow. So they knew they needed an offline biological backup system.
Yeah.
But you can't just catch wild birds in the French countryside and expect them to deliver classified intel, right? You need a trained fleet.
Right, and that necessity birthed the U.S. Army Signal Corps Pigeon Service, which was officially established in November 1917.
Okay, so late in the war.
Yes. And they began importing birds, heavily relying on the British, who actually had this massive culture of competitive pigeon racing before the war, so they had the genetic stock ready to draft.
That's wild. They drafted racing pigeons. Which brings us to the specific bird we're looking at today. Cher Ami was one of 600 English-bred homing pigeons donated to the U.S. Pigeon Service in May of 1918. And the level of record-keeping on these animals is honestly amazing. We know his exact leg band was stamped with NURP 18 EAD 615.
And that registry system tells a story of its own. So NURP stands for National Union Racing Pigeon.
Yeah.
The 18 is his birth year, 1918, which means he was likely hatched in late March or early April. So he was barely a few months old when he saw combat.
Wait, really? A teenager pigeon, basically.
Basically, yeah. And the EAD refers to the registered breeder's loft. It points to a breeder named E.A. Davidson in Norfolk, England.
Wow.
The military needed to track this because pigeon navigation is heavily tied to genetics and really rigorous breeding.
Well, let's talk about that navigation because that is the core mechanism of this whole story. How does a bird actually know where to go?
It's fascinating.
And more importantly, how do you train a bird to fly back to a military base that is constantly moving? Because looking at the sources, these birds were assigned to mobile lofts, right?
Yeah.
And some of them were literally just old retrofitted double-decker buses driven near the front lines.
Yeah, it's a total marvel of biology. So homing pigeons use a combination of tools. They possess magnetoreception.
Meaning what?
Exactly. Meaning they can literally detect the Earth's magnetic fields to orient themselves.
Like a biological compass.
Exactly. They also use the position of the sun, and they build these complex olfactory maps, so they are essentially navigating by smell, too.
That is crazy. But what about the moving buses?
Right. To train them for a mobile loft, the loft managers, like this guy Ernest Cockler, who managed Cher Ami's mobile loft number 11, they relied on intense habituation.
Okay.
They kept the birds slightly hungry. So when a bird was released, its instinct to return to the specific smell of its loft, combined with the promise of food, overpowered everything else.
So even if the bus had moved a few miles down the road, the bird would just sniff it out and find it.
Exactly.
Okay, so you have this elite biological network meticulously bred and trained. But a backup network is only truly tested when the primary systems fail. And in October 1918, everything failed in just the most spectacular, tragic way possible.
Yeah, it did.
We need to set the scene for the Meuse-Argonne offensive.
Well, to give you a sense of scale, the Meuse-Argonne offensive remains the deadliest battle in United States military history. Over 1 million American soldiers were involved.
Over 1 million. Wow.
Yeah, right. And we are following a specific element of this, the 1st and 2nd Battalions of the 77th Infantry Division, commanded by Major Charles W. Whittlesey.
Okay.
On October 2nd, they receive orders to push deep into the dense, tangled, mist-covered Argonne forest.
And the terrain alone there is a nightmare. Thick brush, deep ravines, just terrible visibility. Whittlesey and his men, which is roughly 554 soldiers, they push forward and end up digging in at a place called the Charlevaux Ravine.
Right.
But the French and American forces on their flanks get stalled, so Whittlesey's men push way too far ahead, and the German forces simply close the gap right behind them.
They are completely cut off, surrounded by hostile forces. And over the next couple of days, the situation degrades from dire to absolutely apocalyptic.
I can't even imagine.
They run out of food, they run out of medical supplies to the point where they are literally using their leg wraps, their puttees, to bind horrific combat wounds.
Oh, man.
And any runner they try to send out to find help is either captured or killed. They are completely isolated, taking heavy casualties.
So surviving behind enemy lines in those conditions is terrifying enough. But what happens on the afternoon of October 4th is just a psychological breaking point. Around 2:30 p.m., artillery shells start raining down in the ravine. But it's not the Germans firing.
Yeah.
It's the American 305th Field Artillery Regiment.
And this is one of the most tragic consequences of the fog of war. It's lethal geographical confusion.
Yeah.
The American artillery batteries are actually trying to save Whittlesey's men. They want to lay down a barrage of protection, essentially a wall of explosions to shield the trapped battalion from the advancing Germans.
But their coordinates were wrong.
Horribly wrong.
Yeah.
The fatal flaw is that the artillery command believes Whittlesey is on the southern slope of the ravine. But Whittlesey and his men are actually dug in on the northern slope.
So the artillery is basically building a wall of fire directly on top of their own men. I mean, you survive the trenches, you survive the encirclement, you are starving and bleeding, and now your own army is blowing you to pieces.
That's a nightmare.
So Major Whittlesey realizes his runners are dead. The radios are totally useless. He has exactly one option left to stop the friendly fire: the wicker pigeon basket.
And by this point, they only have 2 pigeons left. Just 2.
Wow.
Whittlesey pulls out a piece of extremely thin paper. It's designed to be lightweight, and writes a desperate, frantic note. I'll quote it exactly for you, including his misspelling. He wrote, "We are along the road parallel 276.4. Our artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it."
For heaven's sake, stop it. That line just hits you in the gut.
It really does.
So he hands this note to Private Omer Richards, who is the designated pigeon handler for the battalion. Richards takes the first of the 2 remaining birds, starts to attach the little aluminum canister to its leg, and right at that very moment, an artillery shell explodes nearby.
Yeah, and the concussive blast just startles Richards. He instinctively ducks, his hands open up, and the bird just flies away in a panic.
Without the message.
Without the message.
I cannot fathom the pit in his stomach in that moment.
Yeah.
Hundreds of men are dying around you, and you just let the lifeline fly away.
Yeah.
So Richards reaches into the wicker basket one last time. He pulls out the very last bird. And supposedly, this is Cher Ami. He secures the canister to the bird's right leg. He releases him, and the bird doesn't fly away.
No, it refuses. In a moment that honestly feels too cinematic to be real, the bird just flutters over to a nearby branch, perches there, and starts preening its feathers.
Wait, artillery is churning the earth into a meat grinder, shrapnel is flying everywhere, and this pigeon is just chilling on a branch.
Pretty much. So Richards literally has to climb out of his cover, exposing himself to enemy fire, to climb the tree and shake the branch to force the bird into the air.
That is dedication. And so the second the bird clears the brush and rises above the canopy, the German forces scot him, right?
Oh, yeah. They aren't foolish. They know exactly what a rising pigeon means.
Right. It means the Americans are trying to transmit coordinates.
Exactly. So the Germans direct their machine gun and rifle fire away from the troops and up into the sky at the single bird.
And they hit him. They literally shoot the bird down. The soldiers watch their very last hope plummet into the brush.
It must have been devastating.
But miraculously, Cher Ami manages to right himself. He takes flight again, wounded, and disappears into the smoke. And this is where the official narrative gives us a statistic that frankly sounds impossible. He supposedly flies 25 miles back to the division headquarters at Rampont, and he does it in just 25 minutes.
Yeah, a mile a minute, wounded. And 5 minutes after he arrives, the American shelling ceases. Ultimately, 194 men walk out of that forest alive.
Wow.
They become known in the press as the Lost Battalion, and Cher Ami becomes an instant legend.
Okay, but hang on. I have to push back here.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at this and thinking, a bird with a hole in its chest, missing a leg, trailing blood, it cannot physically maintain a speed of 60 miles an hour for 25 straight miles.
Right.
The aerodynamics alone just don't make sense.
Yeah.
Something in this official military record doesn't add up.
And you are exactly right to be skeptical. And that skepticism leads us directly into the historical veracity of this entire legend, because as incredible as the story is, modern historical research strongly suggests the military engaged in some highly creative editing.
Okay, walk us through the evidence. How do we know the story was tweaked?
Well, we look to researchers like Frank Blazich Jr. He's the curator of modern military history at the Smithsonian Institution, and he started pulling at the threads of the official documentation. Now, the famous injuries that Cher Ami is known for, shot in the breast, missing a right leg, blinded in one eye, the message canister hanging by a single tendon, those injuries are absolutely real.
Right, because we still have the body.
Exactly. The taxidermied body sitting in the Smithsonian proves it. But when he sustained those injuries, that is the mystery.
Wait, so if it wasn't on October 4th above the Charlevaux Ravine, when was it?
Well, Blazich found official Signal Corps records indicating that a bird matching Cher Ami's exact description and injuries actually flew a completely different mission from a town called Grand Pré.
Oh, really?
Yes. And that flight happened on either October 21st or October 27th, which is weeks after the Lost Battalion was rescued.
Okay, that changes things.
And furthermore, the distance from Grand Pré to the loft at Rampont is exactly 25 miles. The distance from the Charlevaux Ravine to Rampont. Only 17 miles.
Whoa, so let me make sure I'm getting this.
Yeah.
If Cher Ami was the actual bird that flew the October 4th mission for the Lost Battalion, he wasn't injured during that flight at all.
Correct.
So the 25-mile, 25-minute wounded sprint didn't happen in the Argonne Forest.
Precisely. Blazich's research suggests that the Army essentially merged two entirely different events.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they took the immense narrative weight of the October 4th Lost Battalion rescue message and combined it with the horrific visual sacrifice of the October flight from Grand Pré.
That is wild. It's like a modern tech startup exaggerating a product demo to secure venture capital or something.
Yeah.
They took two impressive but entirely separate data points and just mashed them together to create an absolute unicorn of a bird.
Exactly.
But why? I mean, why go through the trouble of forging a composite legend like that?
Well, you have to remember the Signal Corps Pigeon Service was a brand new, highly unconventional branch of the military. Right. They were constantly fighting for relevance, for funding, and for respect from the old guard generals who still wanted to rely on wires and runners. They desperately needed a definitive, undeniable hero to prove the concept of their department.
Ah, that makes sense.
A bird that simply delivers a message safely is a good tool. But a bird that delivers a message while half destroyed by enemy fire, that is a martyr, and that gets you funding.
Put yourself in the shoes of the American public in 1918, too. When you hear this story in the newspapers, you aren't fact-checking dates and distances, right? You are just desperately looking for proof that the universe hasn't entirely abandoned your boys in the trenches.
Absolutely. The psychology of wartime propaganda requires a focal point for hope.
Yeah.
The reality of war is messy, it's disjointed, and it's often pointless. Legends are neat. They provide a narrative anchor for a grieving nation. And the narrative the Signal Corps chose worked flawlessly.
It really did.
Regardless of which bird did what, the name Cher Ami became a massive national phenomenon.
And the military leaned all the way in. I mean, in April of 1919, Cher Ami travels back to the United States aboard a ship called the Ohioan. And he's traveling in the personal cabin of a man named Captain John L. Carney.
Yes, and Captain Carney is the true architect of the Cher Ami mythos as we understand it today. When he disembarked in the United States, he immediately started working the press.
He knew what he was doing.
Oh, absolutely. He held up this battered one-legged pigeon, and he was the one who most directly credited the rescue of the Lost Battalion to this specific wounded bird.
So he essentially steps off the boat, points to the bird's missing leg, and says, "This right here is the price of saving 200 American lives."
Yep.
And the press just devours it.
They absolutely ate it up. Carney likely had read a summary of Cher Ami's actions at Grand Pré and intentionally merged it for the press with the legendary reports of the Lost Battalion Pigeon.
Wow.
Soon, the story was everywhere, and with every retelling, new, increasingly dubious details were added to the myth.
Which brings us to the medals. Because this is my favorite myth to bust from the sources today, because it shows just how quickly a good story outpaces the truth.
Oh, for sure.
There were endless news reports, and even a 1919 silent film called The Lost Battalion, claiming that General Pershing personally pinned the Distinguished Service Cross on Cher Ami.
Which is entirely fabricated. Pershing did see the bird off at the docks in France, which, to be fair, is a sign of immense respect from a commanding general.
Definitely.
But he never awarded the bird a Distinguished Service Cross. The U.S. military simply didn't have a protocol for awarding human valor medals to animals.
But the bird did receive real honors, right? Just not that specific one.
Yes, the French military awarded Cher Ami the Croix de Guerre with a palm oak leaf cluster.
Oh, wow.
And the Croix de Guerre is a serious military decoration for valor. The French recognized that this bird, or perhaps the composite idea of this bird, delivered 12 critically important messages around the Verdun sector. So the bravery was real, even if the specific American narrative was tweaked.
Still, Carney kept the PR train rolling. He took Cher Ami to numerous press events, parading him around like a celebrity before the bird was finally housed at a loft in Potomac Park in Washington, D.C.
Tragically, though, the retirement was very short-lived. Cher Ami died on June 13, 1919, at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. The lingering effects of those battle wounds simply caught up to him.
But even in death, the U.S. military knew exactly what they had on their hands. I mean, a symbol this potent doesn't just get buried in the backyard.
No, definitely not.
The Army Signal Corps donated his remains to the Smithsonian Institution. A taxidermist named Nelson R. Wood at the National Museum of Natural History prepared the body, and he's been on display there since 1921.
And what's genuinely funny about his induction into the Smithsonian is that even back in 1921, the museum curators asked the military for the official war record.
Naturally.
And the Signal Corps essentially shrugged and admitted they couldn't find any concrete record proving Cher Ami was the specific bird from the Lost Battalion.
Are you kidding me?
Nope. But they handed over the taxidermy anyway, describing the bird, without any scientific explanation, as a male.
Which leads to the most absurd modern twist in this entire century-old saga. For 100 years, nobody actually knew if Cher Ami was a male or a female. The Army just declared the bird was a he, and history just went with it. But in 2021, doctors Carla Dove and Robert Fleischer at the Smithsonian finally took tissue samples from the preserved body and ran a full DNA test.
Yeah, and the DNA sequencing finally confirmed what the Army had merely guessed. Cher Ami was indeed a cock, a male bird.
That's hilarious.
It took a century of technological advancement to solve a lingering biological mystery about a World War I pigeon.
It is wild to think about, and his legacy just refuses to fade. Even if the Lost Battalion story was a carefully constructed composite, the symbol of Cher Ami continues to be honored. I mean, as recently as November 2019, he was posthumously awarded the Animals in War and Peace Medal of Bravery on Capitol Hill.
Which really speaks to the enduring power of the symbol. Whether Cher Ami was a single miracle bird who defied physics, or a composite representation of the entire 600-bird pigeon service, he stands in for all of them. He represents the sheer grit of those animals.
So, bringing all of this back together, what is the real takeaway here? I think it brings us back to the psychological reality of the trenches. The human need for heroes is so profoundly wired into us that in our darkest moments, we sometimes have to look past human soldiers entirely.
Yeah, we project our hopes and our desperate need for miracles onto a one-pound bird.
Exactly. Cher Ami represents the agonizing stakes of the Meuse-Argonne offensive. You have thousands of men trapped in the mud, watching all of their brilliant modern human technology just fail them. And their fragile lives are saved only by an equally fragile creature of the sky.
It completely strips away the illusion of human control. I mean, we build these massive mechanized engines of war. We lay miles of wire and invent heavy radios. But in the end, salvation for those 194 men came down to a few feathers, a desperately scribbled note, and an animal's instinct to fly home to its loft.
It leaves you with a really fascinating thought to chew on. What other historical legends that we hold, the stories we teach in schools and make movies about, might actually be composite stories?
It makes you wonder.
It really does. And if they are composites, if there are several incredibly brave acts rolled into one perfect PR-friendly narrative, does that actually make them any less meaningful to the people who desperately needed to believe in them? It is definitely something to ponder the next time you hear a historical story that sounds just a little too cinematic to be true. Thanks for listening to PPL Pod. Keep tuning in for more stories worth knowing.